Michael Rymer's 2002 film Queen of the Damned is, well, it's pretty bad. There's not really a nice way to say that. It's one of those love to hate, hate to love 2000s flicks that you can't tear your eyes away from. The narrative is questionable, the acting is flat, and it draws so loosely from the book that it was inspired by that Anne Rice completely wrote it off. Of course, it is above all else a product of its time. A Letterboxd review from user Madison described it as a 2-hour Evanescence music video, and they wouldn't be wrong in saying so. The film opens up with a shot of a punk rocker fiddling around on a guitar, and we're forced to pay very close attention to his nipple piercing, in case there was any doubt about how cool he is. But vampires were a huge phenomenon in the early 2000s and mid-2010s. Of course, films like Twilight, which hit theaters in 2008, took the world by storm, kickstarting a vampire fever. Everyone wanted to be a vampire. It started with books, then movies, and even, much like our beloved vampire Rocco Lestat, bled into music with bands like My Chemical Romance, who have insisted they're not vampires, but after watching Queen of the Damned, I'm not so sure. In any case, the vampire is a very particular entity. It's been portrayed in many different ways over the years, some scarier than others, and yes, the idea of a glittering man made out of porcelain is rather terrifying, but at its core, the vampire is a very sad creature. Few and far between is the happy vampire. Anne Rice, the vampire powerhouse herself, has stated that all vampires are born out of trauma. It is a horrifying thing in its essence, a humanoid creature who drains the life force of mortals to keep their own immortal selves going. They're confined to the dark of night, never allowed to enjoy the warmth of the sun. Even the ones who claim to love their vampirism are normally just sadists with the bonus of being immortal, or liars who mask their underlying trauma to appear more attractive. But beyond the horror of it all, there's an inherent eroticism in vampirism and all it entails. It's secret, lucrative. The feeding is done through the jugular vein, making it sensual underneath the horror. It becomes intimate, sexy. And this is one thing that Rymer does well in Queen of the Damned, almost annoyingly well. In examining Queen of the Damned, I want to look at how Rymer's vampire challenges the conventions associated with horror and turns a notorious monster into a sex symbol. Before we can talk about how and why Rymer's vampire is done so well, we first have to look at what exactly the vampire is and what purpose it serves in most media. According to Kate Buckley, vampires in folklore and literature have been a means by which human cultures have identified concepts of human subjectivity, identity, particularly with regard to what various societies have defined as monstrous, being othered, within human nature. Like most things, they serve as a tool that is representative of a bigger narrative. On the literal side, the vampire is a monster. They're people who've lost their humanity and lives and must live off the blood of the living to survive. They've been depicted in many ways, though typically gaunt, pale, and sullen, like walking corpses with long, pronounced canines used for puncturing the veins of their victims. In Rice's case, upon being granted vampirism, her vampire's eyes will change color, their nails will grow thicker, and they, like most iterations, will not age or change past the point at which they were turned. Typically, the vampire is a loner. They dwell in the depths of ancient castles and skulk about at night in hopes of a meal. Some vampires have covens, a group of vampires typically belonging to one bloodline or faction, but even still, the vampire is a lonely creature. In order to hide their monstrous nature, they often adapt certain personalities in order to lure in their prey. Thus comes the vampire flirt. The first example of this that comes to mind is Lestat, who, in every iteration, is shown to be alluring and irresistible. In the book, movie, and TV adaptations of Interview with the Vampire, he is shown to have lured Louis in with his charming remarks, handsome face, and mystical intrigue. Further reading would allow anyone to know that he's not the well-put-together aristocrat he portrays himself to be, but no one needs to know that. It's the sly, charming smile, the way with words that has Louis, his victims, and the viewer enraptured by him. In Queen of the Damned, he's a rock star. He sells at arenas and positively drips sex appeal in the way only a rock star can. His band self-describes themselves as sex, blood, and rock and roll, and Lestat's state of dress, his teasing voice, has his fans and viewers of the film hanging off his finger. Or fangs, I guess. It's this sex appeal that makes him so terrifying. We, the viewer, know that Lestat is a monster. We know that with every lilted word and flirtatious smile lies a sinister desire. It's a trap. It's always been a trap. What begins with a kiss, chaste enough, becomes the sharp pain of fangs piercing the tender flesh of the throat, and yet, despite the initial pain of it, the ache slowly morphs into pleasure. In the TV iteration, Louis compares it to the best high an addict has ever had, multiplied by miles to the rings of Saturn and back. When Jessie, in Queen of the Damned, finds herself being accosted by vampires outside the bar, one tells her that if he bites her, she might even like it. Likewise, there's something inherently sexual about the act of being bitten by a vampire. We see Lestat and Marius moan as Marius takes him into his arms and turns him. His hands clutch desperately at Marius's back as Marius looms over him. Their eyes roll into the back of their heads. If we didn't know any better, we might have thought, for a moment, that something else was going on between them. This idea of sexuality and horror intersecting is displayed further in the scene when we're first introduced to Akasha, the titular Queen of the Damned. She, who's been catatonic for a number of centuries, is roused from her slumber by the sound of Lestat's music. She finds herself in a vampire bar where she sticks out like a sore thumb in her ancient garb. It's revealing and has just a dash, or maybe a heaping scoop of Orientalism, showing off the curves of her body as she sways and dances. Even the other club-goers, both human and vampire alike, are dressed in a similar, scantily clad fashion and posed in a visually enticing way. It's all curves and sharp juts of bone. The camera sits low, so our eyes are forced to linger on the bodies that stand before us. The music in this scene, and many others, is a low, thumping bass line and breathy vocals typical of the nu metal genre. It's sexy. It's supposed to be sexy, and it's still sexy even when she rips out another vampire's heart and eats it. While the VFX is simply another product of its time, the scene is graphic and violent, a staple in a large number of films of the same genre, but its campiness and focus on the body takes the horror away and replaces it with something more intimate. Williams describes such scenes as the spectacle of a body caught in the grip of intense sensation or emotion. Fear and arousal are arguably similar feelings. There's a rush of adrenaline, the heart races, sweat beads at the nape of the neck. The clubgoers scream, but we can't take our eyes off of Akasha. She's the subject of the scene, honed in at the center, and our gaze is drawn to the way blood drips from her mouth as she walks slow and sultry through the crowd, killing them all one by one. Rymer knows what he's doing here. Even if the fear of the moment is lost on us, the sex appeal isn't. Drawing reference to Bordwell and Thompson's piece on cinematography, the speed with which the camera moves as we follow her on her crusade through the bar keeps us engaged and invigorated. The slow zooms and panning forces us to take in the intensity of the scene. The violence is showcased with the same intensity as when Akasha draws in her first victim. It's slow, sensual, even as the vampires try to escape her. While the quality of Queen of the Damned can and has been debated, there isn't any doubt that Rymer makes a good vampire. Maybe it's not the best vampire, especially compared to the counterparts we've seen in other iterations of the Vampire Chronicles, but it certainly is captivating. It gets to a certain point in Queen of the Damned where it doesn't matter if the character is good or not. Rymer's vampire isn't about how much emotional depth he can fit into a 6-foot-tall rock star and his ancient vampire companion. It's about how his vampire looks, and what that vampire makes us feel. Rymer doesn't make us think about how to feel, because he tells us. It's almost as though, with his camera work, his music choices, and his character design, he forces us to feel this way. He gives us the gross film that Williams speaks on. In fact, he checks all of her boxes. Gratuitous sex, gratuitous violence, gratuitous emotion. There's no lack of anything in Rymer's film. It's like he tried to cram as much of everything as he could within the 2-hour time limit, and even then, we still barely know what's going on. But I think that the takeaway from all of that is that it doesn't really matter either. Horror is, of course, supposed to scare you, and Queen of the Damned definitely isn't scary in a conventional way. What's really terrifying is just how much Rymer makes us want something.